Our top story takes us back to Israel and its war with Hamas producing humanitarian need. Eric Kulisch is here reporting on one way that aid is certainly trying to get to the people that need it. Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, good morning, Bill. Thanks for having me on the show.
So, Eric, let's dig into it. Obviously, we know the humanitarian aid situation is continuing to escalate out in Israel as the war continues to drag on. Right now, what does that aid delivery process look like, and who's working really hard to get it in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the airlift. There's some sort of airlift going in minimally to the Sinai Peninsula to get stuff into Gaza through the World Health Organization. But the story I wrote the other day was about supplies getting into Israel, which doesn't have the same type of humanitarian needs, but still needs a lot of supplies and medical equipment and just regular consumer goods. And I was on a briefing with a couple of logistics companies, DHL and Seco Logistics in the U.S. And Seco pointed out an interesting thing that, even though Israel is a thriving economy, imports and exports, is manufacturing, with this war going on, it's going to constrain the economy. A lot of able-bodied men are reservists in the Army and are being called up, so that'll slow production. The economy won't work as normal, and they'll need to import a lot more goods. So, Seco is trying to ramp up there. They've rented a temporary warehouse near the northern port of Haifa to help bring in more goods. And DHL, Global Forwarding, the forwarding arm, not the express group, but the forwarding part of DHL, they've chartered a freighter, a Boeing 767 flying daily from from Belgium. And they're flying that every day into Tel Aviv for a couple weeks, and then they'll monitor whether to continue with it. I should also note that DHL Express, the express package arm, has been flying in regularly to Tel Aviv despite the conflict since it started.
That's certainly quite a flight to go all the way from Belgium into Tel Aviv daily to make that kind of move there as well. In terms of things that are being required to go into Israel, is it basically essentials, or are they still trying to say, for instance, business as usual?
Yeah, I mean, I think this flight is business as usual. Israel's going to need a lot of everything and try and, commodities, material, raw materials and so forth. So it's a combination of both. Global Crossing Airlines is a small startup airline. We may have talked about it here a week ago. They're based out of Miami, and they flew a bunch, a couple flights with some narrow body freighters they own. They flew to Israel with medical supplies, first aid gear, hospital gowns, IV drip equipment and so forth that was donated by people and groups in hospitals in Florida. Those flights were arranged under the auspices of the state government and Governor Ron DeSantis there. So I don't know if those will be ongoing or not, but that was his attempt to show that, the U.S. government wasn't doing enough. So he jumped in to help, supposedly help Floridians in Israel and other U.S. citizens. But, those flights were, quote unquote, more humanitarian related and had to take a northern route to get there because they're not long haul freighters.
So, Eric, for humanitarian aid specifically looking to enter both Gaza and the West Bank, we know that those two territories are very difficult to get into. A lot of the aid has had to go around, maybe into Egypt, and then get ready to cross the border into Gaza itself, things like that. Is this still continuing to be a pretty sticky point for a lot of the aid that's trying to get in to support the Palestinians in Gaza, because they can't get in across the border right now? And has there been any effort to really make that a point of kind of emphasis instead of just supporting the economy of Israel?
Yeah, obviously there's, I don't know what's happened in the past 24 hours, if the flow of trucks from Egypt has been allowed to increase into Gaza, but, everyone's rushing to try and get more aid flowing in there, negotiate an arrangement between Israel, Hamas, Egypt. And so hopefully more trucks are starting to flow. It was a trickle a couple days ago, a couple dozen trucks. They need hundreds of trucks a day. So hopefully that'll open up. Then there'll be more air freighters coming into an airfield in Sinai to, supply those trucks.
Eric, we also want to touch on a story that broke late yesterday about Polar Air Cargo executive pleading guilty to swindling his former employer. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, Polar Air Cargo is a large freighter operator, joint venture between Atlas Air and DHL Express, and several of their executives were indicted and arrested early this year on a big kickback scheme. And one of the Robert Shermer, one of their big vice presidents, was pleaded guilty on Tuesday to wire fraud and other types of fraud. Basically, he faces up to 5 years in prison. I think he's going to forfeit more than, close to $1 million, and has to pay a restitution back to Polar Air Cargo of several millions of dollars. So it was an elaborate scheme. A lot of people were involved. It basically, involved some of these executives at Polar Air Cargo working with vendors like ground handlers, trucking companies, freight forwarders, and other customers to give them sweetheart pricing or sweetheart contracts. And they would get money under the table. It turned out they owned some of shares in some of these companies they were doing business with, and they set up these limited liability off the book companies of their own, which would, where they could accept the kickback money, less directly, and try and keep it hidden. So, it was an interesting development yesterday.
So, Eric, it looks like from this, we have a hearing for sentencing scheduled on February 13th, so a while from now. What do those consequences potentially look like in this situation? Are we talking jail time, fines, anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's up to the judge. We'll see what he comes down with, but it could be up to 5 years in prison. Apparently, Shermer's agreed to pay more than $900,000 or forfeit that money back to the government and pay several millions of dollars to Polar Air Cargo in restitution. So we'll see. I don't know if he's got the money, how that's going to all work out, but those are kind of the terms so far.
Tough situation there for Polar Air in terms of hopefully they're happy they're probably going to get some of that money back there as well, but tough situation for them to follow. Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.